walking out of this podcast, I'm done. That'll be the end of my career. So I turn on the webcam and I do see Chad Dingleton, but oh my God, there's John Bierce, a real author.
And definitely a human. Hello, fellow humans.
Hello. All right. So yeah, sorry about all that, John, but
no worries.
Would you like to give a quick introduction to yourself for anybody who may not know you or the stuff you write?
I'm John Bierce. I write cheesy fantasy novels. My family and my wife are always getting on me to don't introduce them as cheesy, right? They're not cheesy. And I'm sorry, my imposter syndrome will not allow me to leave out the cheesy. It is a necessity.
I don't know. I definitely don't think the Wrack was cheesy. That's pretty serious sci-fi fantasy literature.
Well, thank you.
I can't take the compliment, but I will acknowledge that you said it.
Exactly. Thank you. You get me. You get me. Yeah, I write really heavily science and history inspired fantasy and sci-fi. Mostly fantasy. I wrote The Wrack, which Ben just mentioned. It's a plague novel, which had the misfortune of coming out right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was slightly awkward timing.
Pretty great,
actually. Or the perfect timing. Do you think it helped or hurt?
I think it was really cathartic for some people to read it then. Like, some people really needed it then, and I got a lot of people like writing me, thanking me. I think most people were like, fuck this, I'm living it. I don't want to read this right now. And my sales were according.
Oh,
they're actually kind of picking up over time as people get like farther away from the initial like craziness and start
nostalgic for the pandemic.
yeah. It's just like I missed lockdown. I missed being away from capitalism. Yeah. And then the series I'm best known for is the Mage Errant series, which is a progression fantasy series. Which progression fantasy is a relatively new subgenre that focuses really hard in on characters getting more powerful over time. You know, training, getting more powerful, learning new magic, that sort of thing. Kind of like Dragon Ball Z-esque stuff. And it does have to be written. But Mage Errant's Wizard School series, following a very socially awkward, anxiety-ridden protagonist who would really rather not be having adventures.
Yeah. So you mentioned Dragon Ball Z, and I have to admit, I've spent the last month or so sort of like, I guess, creeping on you. I've watched all the interviews. I've read all the blog interviews, and you've mentioned a lot that you were trying to write comics for a while when you came up with Mage Errant. And so I was kind of wondering, what kind of comics are you interested in? Do you read manga like Dragon Ball Z, or was it more superhero or indie image comics? Like,
I read all sorts of stuff, but the bulk of it is like definitely more the image indie stuff these days.
Okay.
I used to read a lot more superhero stuff, but I've gotten a bit burnt out on superheroes the past few years.
I'm with you there.
Pretty much most of the world, I feel like.
What do you have a particular comic that you think was influential or inspirational to the way you write now?
That is a tricky one. Let's see. I mean, okay, this is really like the stereotypical answer for a dude my age, but Watchmen.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It really was. You know, for all that it is just like everyone's read it, it's become mainstream. Like everyone says, oh, Watchmen's my favorite. It's really good. Right.
I think, Watchmen was the one that, I think that's where they started calling them graphic novels.
It was somewhere around there, yeah. It was one of the first to get taken away seriously, you know. And then I love a lot of other stuff, ranging from like, like more indie stuff like Mouse to uh, uh, one of my biggest influences is semi obscure. It came out right at the beginning, like the big image boom in like 2012 or something. But it's Planetoid by Ken Goering, and
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
There's 2 graphic novels. They're both 100-something pages. Really good, just like gorgeous art. He illustrated the whole thing himself. And the basic premise is, guy crash lands on this alien trash planet and has to survive, and there's aliens hunting him and stuff. But it kind of twists that formula a bit, and he starts building because in like the second issue or something, he starts building a community, right? And he starts getting all these various refugees, human and alien and stuff, and starts putting together a town. And the entirety, it starts building, and then the entirety of the third issue is they're not fighting aliens or anything; they're just building this town. Like they're finding renewable food sources, like building algae tanks to grow food in. They find this big metal pillar in the junkyard that's covered in like mushrooms, and they drag it back to the town to have like a mushroom pillar thing.
Yeah,
and like the climax.
Oh. I was gonna say just comics where the conflict isn't the combat.
Yeah, and there's still a bunch of great fight scenes in there, but like the climax of that specific issue was a full panel spread of the main character building a kite for the kids in the little village out of trash, and it's just them flying the kite. And it's just this sci-fi epic, and that's the climax of this issue, and that just kind of stuck with me, right? I think in a very real sense, like he was trying to approach the same thing that Ursula K. Le Guin did with like her later Earthsea books, being like, okay, all these epic wizard battles and stuff, they're kind of not what's the most important thing to talk about with these fantasy worlds. What are regular people doing? How are they raising goats? What is their socialized? And
that's always been my favorite thing about sci-fi fantasy is it's the sugar that makes the medicine go down. Nate'll dig me on this, but that's what I love about Dune. Is like Dune. It's very loose. Like there he goes. But yeah, I won't talk about Dune. But yeah, it's just like the sex ninjas are so very much not the point.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the sex ninjas.
He finds a way to make it boring. So are you still
there?
Oh, no, go on.
Don't forget the other sex ninjas in the later Dune books.
Oh, yes.
There's more than one group of sex ninjas.
He manages to make a civil war between sex ninjas. Still political and boring.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And there's the... Nate, you look like you're dying a little bit inside.
A little bit.
Little bit.
Little bit.
Is there a way to make it not Dune? But... So are you still planning to write comics, or do you...
That's the ambition. Comics are tough to break into. It's not as bad as like screenwriting or children's books, but it's tough.
Are children's books that hard to break into? I've never looked into that at all.
I don't actually know as much about it as I do like screenwriting or comics, but everything I've heard, like getting to the top tier children's books is just crazy competitive.
Wow.
It's shelf space, right? Seeing who's going to get the shelf space.
So do you know how does, if you were to try to pitch a comic, would you just do it to like Image? Do you get an artist, you put together a couple of pages and like pitch it, or?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay. And I've got an artist actually. So I've been doing replacing all the covers on Mage Errant with new covers. And the pencil artist on that, before Mage Errant took off, we were actually working on a pitch together, and it got shelved for various reasons. But we've been dusting it off, and we're planning on pitching that here sometime soon. So, yeah, fingers crossed.
Now, is that the next big project after Mage Errant?
The next big project after Mage Errant actually just got announced on a recent podcast I was on. I don't know if you watched that one, Ben.
I haven't seen that one yet.
You're letting us down, Ben.
Oh, there's a gap in my knowledge.
This one was the... so it's a podcast where guests go on and build a world with the host. They design it from scratch, use science to come up with this weird world and aliens that live on it, right? Exolore with Dr. Moya McTeer. Highly recommend it. It's great. But I announced my. If you want me, if you feel free to take out me talking about another podcast when you air it. If you don't want to,
no. Ben talks about other podcasts all the time.
Yeah,
yeah. I don't know the etiquette there. I'm still relatively new to the podcast guest thing. But announced on there. So my next big project is the series name is More Gods Than Stars, and the first book is going to be called The City That Would Eat the World.
Ah. So are we still doing progressive fantasy?
Still progression fantasy, and it is a it's very heavily New Weird inspired. Like China Mieville. I don't know if you read any China Mieville.
I've heard of it. So I haven't heard the term New Weird though. Is that like an update on the weird fiction of like the 30s, like the Lovecraft stuff, or?
Oh, they're definitely related. H.P. Lovecraft has strong influence on the New Weird authors, but no, the New Weird started around like the early 2000s, and China Mieville is probably the most prominent author, and then Jeff Vandermeer, the guy who wrote Annihilation, the book.
Oh, okay.
Another prominent member, and the New Weird's known for its blending of genres, mixing in horror and sci-fi and fantasy and steampunk and whatever, and just kind of really plays the edge of, the boundaries of the genres and, Oh, you vanished a bit there, Ben.
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
Just sound, no picture.
Oh.
Well, I can see you.
Interesting.
Huh.
I can still see you.
Yeah.
No, we'll roll with
but
it.
We'll roll it.
So this would lean. Do you think this is leaning more sci-fi or is it more fantasy? Or a blend?
A blend. Like I definitely tend to blur the lines quite a bit, right? The Wrack was solidly, epic fantasy, but I was very careful to use real life epidemiology in designing the disease. The titular Wrack. I had like epidemiologist beta read it after, I did like over a year of research and so I was very focusing on doing like it's a hard science story just in a fantasy world with magic, right?
Well, and that was actually one of my questions. You're touching on it is kind of twofold. One, what got you interested in epidemiology, especially because like I read the Wrack in the context of the pandemic when everyone was an amateur epidemiologist, but when you were writing that must have seemed like it came out of nowhere to a Mage Errant fan.
I kind of warned them a bit that I was writing this. But no, when I was a little kid, I was obsessed with medieval Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just obsessed. Checked out all the picture books in the library, and you cannot be into medieval Europe without just huge amounts of focus on the Black Death, right?
Right.
It's the single biggest thing that happened in Europe in the last 1,500 years, right? Bigger than both world wars combined, right? Like the Black Death, this is the biggest thing to happen in Europe since the fall of Rome.
Yeah.
Fall of Rome. Rome lost its western half and then just stuck around for another 1,000 years.
Oh, you're going to get Nate going on history.
Gladly. Man, that book from the 1800s people still read, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire? What's the author's name? Fuck that guy and his the Eastern Roman Empire. What a douche.
Oh, man.
It's Byzantine erasure. That's what that is.
Byzantine erasure.
They do not deserve that shit. Me, opinionated about history? No, I would never spend
never accuse
time
you of
cussing
that.
out long dead historians. No,
that asshole. Yeah,
somebody dead ruined my life again.
But yeah, so I kind of got interested in epidemiology via the way of the Black Death. Right, I got fascinated with that. There's always a side interest. And then when I started going to school for geology, I also started getting really into environmental history alongside that, right? Because that's kind of the natural overlap of, being a history buff and studying geology is environmental history. And epidemiological history is just a part of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of fueled over time. And I started diving deeper and deeper into epidemiology. One really influential book on me was Spillover by David Quammen.
I haven't read that one.
Nonfiction came out in like 2010 to 2012, somewhere in there, I think. And when the pandemic happened, a lot of people were like, David Quammen predicted the pandemic and spillover, like explicitly said that, within the next 10 to 20 years, we could see a coronavirus pandemic. And which, of course, David Quammen's answer to that was, no, I fucking didn't. The scientists who I interviewed did. He was pretty salty about that. Like, no, I'm just the messenger here. But I dove in, read I read literally dozens of books and articles and all that stuff when researching for the Wrack. And
so was the choice to make it to put it in a fantasy setting with magic, was that just sort of how you grounded it in a world similar to that of the Black Death, but were able to give them the tools to deal with it? Or
absolutely, yeah. Even if medieval Europeans had germ theory, they would have struggled to make any meaningful, to achieve any meaningful understanding of the Black Death, for no other reason than they just lacked the tools. They lacked, microscopes. They lacked optics techniques to even make microscopes. They lacked the statistical analysis techniques they would have needed. Right? They just, right? They weren't any dumber than we are. They're not any less intelligent, right? They just lack the tools to handle this stuff and the background knowledge. And if I want to do a fantasy novel where, medieval analog people can actually meaningfully address a pandemic, I need to give them some edge. And that's where the magic in the Wrack came from.
Was there any particular inspiration behind the glass eyes? Because that was like... I really like the glass eyes. I don't know if Nate is with me on this. I like the body modification of it, the almost body horror. The person who replaced both his eyes. I'm
big on body modification. Not on myself, but in fiction.
Yeah.
I'm too squeamish to mod myself. I mean, I got tattoos, I guess, is low-grade body modding. I got
Oh, Godzilla.
Godzilla and Ukiyo-e style.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All my tattoos are very nerdy. I've got, I've got a beholder on the back of my calf. I've got Graboid from Tremors on my thigh. I've got a map of Middle Earth on my back.
That's awesome. Oh, man.
So, yeah, but yeah, the crystal eyes. Crystal, not glass. There's an important difference.
Yes.
Yeah, you weren't paying attention in your mineralogy classes, were you?
I knew I was going to get criticized for my knowledge of geology, which is none.
Oh my gosh.
I know that there are rocks and that there are different kinds of rocks. The end.
I know 3. Yeah.
Ores, that's a thing.
I hate to break this to you, but the different types of rocks, those are just artificial constraints on there that we put on because humans cannot handle the truth. It's all just rock.
That's
all
the
thing of geology.
That sounds about right. That's not surprising at all. Knowing medicine the way I do.
Oh, another kitty coming by to say hi.
Oh.
But yeah, no. to explain it's all rock, like literally, like the difference between like the different rocks, it basically comes down to how they're formed, different ways they're formed, and what their mineral composition is. And you can really look at a lot of different rocks as just statistical ranges, right? The statistical range between sandstone and mudstone is just how big are the grains inside. Sandstone has bigger grains, bigger grains of cemented stuff together
I did
versus
not know
mudstone.
Oh,
Right.
usually the Minecraft UI tells me the difference
That's
between
fair,
the two.
this. Yeah.
Right.
You can make steps out of the sandstone. So.
Yeah. And so this is not actually a complete tangent, because this comes down to how I designed the magic system in the Wrack. So one of the ways that we tell different rock types apart and sort them, and do not chew on that, kitten. One of the different ways that we sort these different rock types is using this tool, geological microscope, basically. And a geological microscope uses polarized light and shines it through, like a hair-thin slice of rock, what we call a thin section. And you just look at it through there, and you can adjust the polarized light, use regular polarized light or cross-polarized light, and it exhibits different features of the mineral grains in the slice. And some of these pictures are beautiful. I can actually, I'm going to pull up a photo and drop it in the chat.
Okay.
And these, this process was really what inspired the magic system in the Wrack. These crystal eyes that they see through. In fact, many of the properties of it's not let me paste an image directly, so I'll just copy the link. Many of the specific properties of the gems were inspired in part by
Oh wow, this looks like stained glass.
absolutely, yeah. Were inspired by the mineral properties. Like, for example, I don't know if you remember in the book, garnet was used for looking at stones, and it showed stones as almost opaque through the vision, unlike most of the crystal eyes, which just show them as like ripples and transparency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is inspired by when you look at garnet in thin section under cross-polarized light, it is completely opaque, unlike most minerals. And that's because garnet and a small handful of other minerals, a very small number, have exactly symmetric crystal structures in a particular way where it just blocks that cross-polarized light completely, and it looks opaque. So I kind of reverse that relationship for the garnet. And other things like emerald for the healing thing, that did not come from geology. That's because in medieval European superstition, emeralds had healing powers.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Right,
hoping for Sonic the Hedgehog, but
those are chaos emeralds. Those are mineralogically quite distinct from real emeralds. Thank you.
Oh man, so that's a whole nother layer to the Wrack that I did not appreciate. But did you have a geologist beta reader? I'm just curious because they must have felt, and this is a pun, I guess, so seen.
No, it's just me. I didn't meet in the geology myself. I don't always get it right. There's one moderately large geological error in a later Mage Errant book, which I'm not going to tell you now because you haven't gotten there yet. But
what book is it in so I could look for it?
It's in book 4.
Book 4. Okay.
Have people pointed it out, or
a couple people have spotted it?
That's awesome.
It's half it's half geological, half mathematical.
Oh,
so if you're really good with geometry, you'll probably spot it. Which I'm sure you guys are just very math minded. It's why you're hosting a book podcast.
I'm a programmer.
Oh, there you go.
I can measure medication doses, and yeah.
I am garbage at math. I'm garbage at it.
I was wondering, though, have you ever programmed? Do you do any coding?
I played around with Learn to Program Basic in like middle school.
Okay. because to me, this is just the lens I see the world through, I guess. A lot of the spell formations in the Wrack, or not the Wrack, I'm sorry, Mage Errant, felt like code. It felt like modules and then building on top of those modules, and even object oriented, like inheritance and stuff like that. I kept seeing it through. I was like, this is obviously like inspired by programming. They're like programming the world. And then I heard the main influence was geology, and I was like, there's got to be so much I don't know about geology.
I mean, I can guarantee that.
Yeah.
There's so much I don't know about it, and I went to school for it. But no, it was definitely partially inspired by coding, even though I haven't really coded myself in a significant way. I have read a lot about it and learned a lot about it, partially just out of curiosity, partially because I end up arguing with a lot of tech bros on the internet about really stupid topics, and so I had to pick up a lot of this knowledge in order to actually discuss stuff, right? Like, I picked up so much knowledge about, like, I don't want to know what Merkle trees are, and I know what Merkle trees are because I had to argue with so many annoying crypto bros on the internet.
Oh my god. But yeah,
I'm glad I don't know what that is.
You're better off.
Okay.
But when Hugh built that the wardstone that could dodge attacks, I was like, that's simple, like fuzzy logic. That's like very. He's going to build a full AI. He's going to implement the A-star pathfinding algorithm. His wardstone.
He's gonna make a magic spell that can beat the world champion at chess. That's my programming knowledge.
Violence.
It's gonna beat up the world champion.
Yeah, I mean, if your opponent in a chess game isn't alive anymore, they can't win. So,
Accurate.
So David beat Goliath. You just throw a rock.
Yeah, that, and that seems like a close relative of the Airbud defense.
The Airbud defense? I'm not familiar.
There's technically no rule that a dog can't play basketball.
I see. Oh, man. So what made you... Did you get pretty close, or did you finish your geology degree?
I was fairly close. Like, I was done with most of the core, like, geology classes. I had, like, a few high-level ones left to go, structure and stuff. And then field camp. But then I also had a lot of math classes that I wasn't done with. Oh,
okay. So did Mage Errant succeed first, or did you just decide you didn't want to do that and you wanted to focus on writing?
So... long story short is I had some freelance writing work that kicked off. I was making better money than I ever had before. And so, a friend of mine at the time convinced me, like, hey, you should just drop out of this quarter, maybe go back later, but for now, just focus on your writing and just make much. It was not the greatest advice in retrospect because the freelance writing money dried up pretty quick. Then I got stuck working at a terrible, terrible grocery store job. I was a grocery store greeter, standing there 40 hours a week, going, hi, welcome to Fred Meyer. Hi, welcome to Fred Meyer. Welcome to Fred Meyer. It was the most mind-numbingly awful job I've ever worked. And in fairness, I was absolutely one of the most awful employees and greeters they've ever had.
How do you measure the quality of a greeting?
I think mostly by the fact that at one of my last weeks on the job, or one of my last days on the job, I spent 7.5 hours of an 8.5-hour shift in the break room. In the secret break room, where the supervisors didn't know about.
There you go. All these people are coming in ungreeted. They've been complaining all day.
Okay, you know what? The real purpose of greeters, it's to dissuade shoplifters.
Right.
And I will tell you this.
They're going to have to look you in the eye on the way out.
Yep, pretty much. I will tell you this. The serious shoplifters the people that are like, I'm going to steal a bunch of drills and then sell it, they are not dissuaded. They're not intimidated. They're
What?
just going to zoom right through. The only
What?
people that it intimidates are like, like poor people who are hungry and need food and they're trying to shoplift food. And pretty quick, while working that job, I was just like, you know what? You know what I'm going to do if I see someone shoplifting food?
I'm just gonna look this way.
Don't care one bit.
I don't see it. No, I actually. It's to the point where I would actually like interfere, like go and like distract nearby other employees if they're like or supervisors or what. Right? I did not give a fuck. I was terrible at my job. I was acting. Like all the assistant managers learned to like dread me getting up to nonsense. But they couldn't fire me because I was technically part of the security department, so I had job security.
That I worked at a mall, and that about sums it up. I had I've told the story on the podcast. I worked at Sears when Sears still existed. Somebody walked in, picked up the most expensive power tool on the shelf, walked over to electronics, and returned it without a receipt. For cash. They just yelled at the manager. Yes. And it was we all watched it happen and nobody could do anything because I think they called security and security never came. So it was perfect.
Was it a manager or an assistant manager?
Oh, it was a manager. At Sears, it was our manager used to love his favorite activity was just chain smoking by the propane tanks.
Sounds like a manager.
Yep.
No, I on one of so I was working at Mage while I was there, right? And at one point I get the book 2 back from my editor. And I just call the manager on duty. I'm like, "Hey, I'm taking the day off." Right? And the next day my managers, because I was just going to work on the edits, like instant I got it, right? Next time my manager just starts talking to me like, you can't just take off work for, your book stuff and, you got to prioritize. And I stopped her. I was just like, the book's my priority. If it comes down to a conflict of interest between this and my book, I will fucking walk off this job just to her face. And she just was like, okay. Didn't say another word.
You got to prioritize. You make a great point. I have.
Yeah. And I made the right choice.
I would say so.
Yeah.
So when did you achieve like income replacement, I guess, for your books? Because that like being able to live on your books, because that is something I think a lot of, especially indie authors, struggle with. Even published authors, really.
After book 2, after Julian III, went from making like $400 a month to, it's kind of exploded. Like I making like thousands a month. Like I think I made, and not high thousands, low thousands, right? I made like the first month book 2 was out like $3,000, like $7,000 the second month, and it started dropping pretty quick. By the time I released book 3, it was down to like $1,500 a month, but I'd lived off less. So.
And is that purely on sales? Just book sales?
So book sales was actually the smaller chunk. The bigger chunk was Kindle Unlimited.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And for people in progression fantasy and a lot of similar genres, cousin genres like lit RPG or even some epic fantasy, though less so with epic fantasy, Kindle Unlimited is hugely profitable. Right.
How does that pay out? Does it like every time somebody checks out the book,
It's by page read.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, it's roughly about maybe $5 per 1,000 pages read. So for some authors with really long books, they'll actually make more off of a Kindle Unlimited read than off a sale.
Wow.
Right. Not so much for me. My books are on the shorter side, but it can be very profitable in the right genre. In progression fantasy
really
and sometimes
interesting.
romance, mystery. Yeah,
huh.
And a lot of it, I was very lucky. I was in the right time at the right place with the right book. Wizard School stuff was huge in 2019. when my books really got going. I got in right at the ground floor of progression fantasy. If I were trying to break into progression fantasy today, it'd be much harder. But I got in at the right time, picked up a big audience, a lot of fans. And I like to think my books are a lot of fun too. That I would do okay now, but.
So how did you pick up the audience? I assume you didn't release the book into the ether and it just found an audience. Did you have to market? Did you have to get on Reddit or Twitter?
Reddit. Twitter's a terrible place to market books by and large. Even those
even
people
worse
with giant...
now.
Especially now.
Yeah. Yep. I'm just gonna say, if you're not charging $8 for a product, it's not possible to market it on Twitter anymore. And if you are charging $8, no one's buying it.
Yep. That is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Oh. Did you hear that Melon Man just fired one of his engineers because he wasn't getting enough views on his tweets?
Oh my god. I got to imagine the only people left have to either be, I don't know, like cult members, or
they're hiding in the break room.
Well, I was going to say they've got their H-1B visa locked or something. Yeah.
Yep.
It's
a lot of sycophants and tech debt. Who wants some tech debt?
Well, it's okay because they're going to focus on engineering now. Yeah, because that's what Elon Musk is. He's an engineer. Sorry, Melon Man.
Yeah,
but
Melon Man.
So yeah, I've seen you're pretty active on the Progression Fantasy subreddit, and
I'm actually one of the moderators, which is
okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the moderation team's about half authors.
That's really cool.
And we try to keep that ratio, and then the non-authors keep writing books and becoming authors. So okay. But I'm really active on there, on our fantasy, and for all that Reddit gets a lot of shit from a lot of people, and for all that it really deserves that shit, it is a great place for an author to be, right? Because if you are an author in your subgenre's subreddit, the people there want to discover your books, right? They're actively looking for more books to read, and that's what made my career, Like literally, I would not have a career without our fantasy.
I was going to say, I think that's probably, being at the right place at the right time is certainly part of it, but finding the right internet community these days seems like the biggest thing, because you on Reddit, you seem to get the trifecta of the user who's going to read your book, the user who's going to write reviews for your book and tell everybody about your book and post everywhere. And then you've got just all of these people who are going to keep discussing it, whether it's bad or good. They're just going to keep it in the mind share.
Yeah, no, it really helps. And then I've also just focused heavily on, building a sustainable fandom. Like there's a Mage Errant subreddit that I'm frequently on. I post like art that I commission on there, and I very much want to cultivate a community for my fans, right? So they stick around for years to give me money.
Well, that brings me to, when did you start?
They're a really fun bunch too. I started my Patreon along with the book 3 release in 2019, and it was something I'd been thinking about for a while. And then while I was working on book 3, I realized that one of the chapters, my beta readers pointed out that one of the chapters didn't really work for the book. It was a good chapter. It just didn't fit the narrative. It kind of went its own direction. Mm-hmm. It was kind of its own little side story. And I was basically just like, okay, fuck it. So I took that and posted that as the first short story on my Patreon. And it worked. It took very little adjustment to make it a working short story on its own.
So I know the fans now can vote on what short story they want released each month.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, how do you structure your writing? So if you're working on, say, the Mage Errant series or now the new project, do you just have a bank of short stories that you can give them, or do you actually have to dedicate some time to generating content for that now?
I have a backlog of short stories now. When I was first doing it, I did not. I was just writing the short stories month to month, and didn't always work out great. Like sometimes I have an idea for a short story, they make everyone vote on that one, then I'd start writing and realize this doesn't work. So I'd have to go to the runner-up, and it's a lot less stressful now, just getting them all done ahead of time. And it's my experimentation ground. It's where I, just play around, try like new writing techniques, explore different genres. Like the short story I just released this month was action horror, in the veins of like Alien or Jurassic Park, right? Another month I did I've actually done quite a few horror short stories. I really enjoy writing them.
So do you get good feedback then from the readers on?
Yeah, no, they seem to mostly enjoy it, and I write all sorts of stuff, right? I've written like epistolary short stories where it's all just like journal entries and letter stuff. I've written what basically amounts to Socratic dialogue short stories.
I was gonna say I've read some, but I haven't been there very long. But I was just surprised because I was wondering, like, to give somebody four options that they could choose, like, wow. I don't think you're writing. I mean, maybe you are, but 4 short stories a month. Do they just come do you just write a short story whenever you get the inspiration? And
at this point, basically, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've been rereading a lot of China Mieville before I dive into the next series, right? And every time I read China Mieville, he inspires at least one short story from me, right? He's just like, he will just write a sentence, and it'll have some concept in the sentence that another author could do a damn novel with, and he just like tosses out, this idea's with one sentence. It's like, fuck you, you're so good. It's like a few days ago, I just, he's having some throwaway comments about some stuff, and I put it together with a couple other random ideas that have been sitting in my head. Literally, he had a comment. He had a character in there who's writing a book with a terrible title. His friend's like, "This title's terrible. Why are you naming the book this? No one's going to buy it." And he's just like, "Because the title cannot be directly translated into French. They don't have direct equivalents for these words. The title will fuck you to the French." And it was just a throwaway gag in the book, right? It was just like, and like, and that little throwaway gag, plus a couple of other things he mentioned, plus a couple ideas been sitting around in my head for a while, kind of lumped together, spun around my head, and just turned into a short story about a demon stuck with student loans rebelling against capitalism and the gods. And joining up with a bunch of bougie artists and creating like linguistic weaponry. I
think that's relatable. I think that's going to do well with the Reddit crowd.
Yeah, if I got to pick between outlining with a demon and student loans. It's definitely the demon, right?
Obviously. I mean, the lesser of two evils.
Oh, by far.
I'm looking at my list of questions. I know I don't think there's ever going to be a way to easily work this in. Nate has a particular video game related question.
There's a very important
give me 1
question.
second.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna refill my drink.
Yeah, do it.
Oh, that was kind of funny. His video paused for a moment, and then it sped up to catch up. So,
John Bierce
he pulled off his headset and just like ran away as quickly as possible.
When did you get these glasses?
Are
these your daughters?
No, but they could be.
They
she gets
really
a little
could
older.
Be.
Yeah. She definitely finds them enjoyable. She sees them on my face and she She wants to come over and take them off.
Sorry, I'm judging his sunglasses.
They are
majestic.
I feel like that if you ran into some fast food mascots, they would probably want to fight you.
Yeah, it does look like you just had like your oh my god.
Nate, the non-trademark generic fast food monarch. The Sandwich Emperor.
Sandwich Emperor.
Sandwich Sovereign.
Perfect.
The Sandwich Sovereign. There we go.
Nate, do you want to ask your stupid question now?
Stupid. This is the most important question by far. So, we, of course, read the first Mage Errant and discussed it on our podcast. And there was a part toward the end where some sort of giant crustacean monster, we'll say like a giant enemy crab, for example. I'm just throwing that out there. Busts in, and they have to target its weak point for massive damage. Was that a reference to the PS3? I think it was like the E3 reveal trailer.
It was a reference to definitely real Japanese history. Yeah, it was absolutely a reference to that. Just oh my god, just the guy just standing there, just like we're drawing from real Japanese battle. Giant crab comes on screen and starts laying waste.
So when Ben said that wasn't the case, Ben was wrong, is what we're saying here.
Not only was Ben wrong, I fully agree that is the most important question you could have asked me.
Oh,
thank
you. Oh, jeez.
Oh, just eviscerated. Ben destroyed by facts and logic.
Enemy crab. Oh.
So, were you a big gamer? Because I've played video games my whole life. I've never seen that E3 thing. Is this like a nerd thing?
You know, I actually don't remember when or how I stumbled across that. I think I stumbled across it like a couple years after it happened. I don't. I don't like to call myself a gamer.
I can't blame you.
Right there with you.
Yeah.
I would say it's because I have self-respect, but it's because I have self-delusion and I can pretend I'm not playing as many video games as actual gamers. This is demonstrably false. I absolutely play that much video games. But I can delude myself for brief periods that I don't.
No, wait. I had a note. Were you the person who beat... Oh, I do not know which Pokemon it was, but with an all Gyarados team?
Yeah.
I told you I've been
Pokemon
creeping.
Crystal.
Yep.
Pokemon Crystal. Mm-hmm.
Why Gyarados?
Why not?
That's touche.
Nice. Got him.
I was like 12 and living on a farm in rural Kansas. We did not have a lot of video games. I played that game many times over.
Where in Kansas, if you don't mind me asking?
Just north of Lawrence, actually.
Okay.
You ever heard of McLouth?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, I went to school at McLouth. Oh, that was...
I don't know.
Do you know there's a rock in the road there?
There's a rock in the road.
There's a rock in the road. You're just driving down, and there's just like, oh, there's just a boulder sticking out of the tarmac there. You know?
To this day.
To this day. No, there's like tales of In the 1800s, they tried to pull the rock out of the road with like a 100-mule team. Wouldn't rock would not come out of the road?
I'm glad you said
So
the
now they're
1800s. I'm sorry.
Technology didn't advance much since then, so now we maybe get 200 mules.
Yeah. Oh, McLouth. It is a nice rock. You know, it's granite. It's quite nice.
Is that what inspired you to get into geology? That rock?
The rock in the road.
So, I never saw the rock until my late 20s.
Oh my god.
I just never went and visited the rock. I did not care about the rock.
It's like the Statue of Liberty. You know, you live in New York City your whole life and you never go because it's just a tourist thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So if anyone, I was going to say this, if anyone's been looking for a place to move and, you know, you want to live around, you know, really boring racist neighbors who are going to judge you a lot, I highly recommend rural Kansas.
Perfect.
If you're Jewish and are looking forward to people saying like, "Oh, Hanukkah, that's how you celebrate Christmas, right?"
That's
I
not as bad
Kansas.
as I thought it was going to get.
No, okay, they're not bad people mostly. They're just
haven't met a
live in a
lot of
small
other
town.
people.
Exactly, yeah, you know. There's so few other people around. It's what you do is you get in other people's business. It's right. If I had spent, you know, less time traveling, visiting, you know, family in Kansas City and all that stuff, you know, I probably would have been much the same, right? It's a matter of circumstance, not of character. That being said, there were some real fucking racist rednecks there.
Well, perhaps unrelated question: is there a rock in the road in Emblem?
The roads are just rocks.
Was that at all inspired by the rural Kansas growing up?
Little bit. No, for another video game related inspiration, at one point I have, I think this might be in the second book, someone's asking Hugh if there's any like monsters in Emblem. He's just like, no, just some big rats and spiders, which is totally a reference to like how in video games, like sometimes the first enemy you fight is just a big rat.
Yeah.
Just big rats. Yeah.
It's a level 1 zone. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my.
Yeah. Oh, way back when I was telling you about the new series, and we got distracted by weird. Yeah. I'm very easy to distract. It's my kryptonite. I'm very ADHD. But so More Gods and Stars. So it's heavily New Weird inspired. It also delves heavily into arcologies and megastructures. Are you guys familiar with arcologies at all?
No.
So in the 1960s and 70s, there's this batshit insane architectural movement, right? Where everyone's just like, let's see who can design the biggest building. And they get bigger and bigger and bigger, like size of multiple skyscrapers, you know, skyscrapers with entire like streets running between them.
Perfect.
Up to the point of, the entire city is one building. Then up to, we just built a single building that's a single like long tower thing that just stretches across the entire North American continent. Or, right, like these are all designs. Very, very few got built, none that big. And so I decided, you know, like I'm going to build a fantasy megastructure. What would inspire a medieval analog fantasy civilization to build a giant megastructure city with tens of millions of people in it? The book itself. It's right now. Planned as a trilogy. Might go over. I'm not the best at avoiding going over. But
you'd be the only fantasy author to ever have that problem.
The only. It's unique. Okay. Do you know there's there's a 27-book trilogy?
It took me a second to process.
The first Xanth Trilogy by Piers Anthony. I don't wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it's 27 books long and it's a trilogy.
It's like the mega structures of fantasy.
It evenly divides into 3, so you know.
Well, yeah, he's like it's
first 9 books. That's your first
3 cubed. It's 3 cubed. Yeah. Weird dude, but I'll give him credit for writing a 27-book trilogy. But yeah, and so diving into a lot of like themes of colonialism and stuff. But also it's just going to be the classic adventuring duo, in the vein of like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse or Gotrek and Felix or whatever, just 2 dumbasses wandering around solving problems with violence.
Okay. So my D&D campaign's there.
I was about to say the exact same thing.
Okay, I've got to ask, how many of your Dungeons & Dragons campaigns have ended with or included at some point, the player party turning into drug dealers?
I'm not going to say it hasn't happened.
At least 2.
Right?
Yeah.
The majority of campaigns that I have DM'd have somehow ended up involving my players selling fantasy drugs.
I'll get to the point where we don't let my wife play an herbalist anymore. Nate ran a nursing RPG, like where we all had to play nurses in a real hospital, and we started stealing the drugs.
James, you remember James? Maybe
I remember
was out
James.
there stealing some morphine.
We're supposed to drain it, and we're like, "Oh, that's a waste of good morphine."
Oh. Yeah, no, what was the specific... I did not think that they were going to go... that my player characters in this campaign were going to go as far as with the drug dealing, or I would have come up with better drugs, other than just hallucinogenic spider urine.
You have to assume the worst. They're going to
so,
refine that. How can we concentrate the urine?
When I was a young idealistic child envisioning my future, I can promise you that I never, ever thought that my life would involve me saying the phrase "spider piss" hundreds of times.
Does it crystallize, and can you smoke it?
I don't even remember. I have suppressed these memories.
I'm already like, you talk about somebody saying one sentence, and you could just write a whole novel about it. It's like,
there's our next one, Ben.
And
let's do it.
That's Nate's next erotica.
Yeah. Oh God. There's an apocalyptic war going on. What's that doing to the drug price market? And the market.
A lot of people are bummed out.
Yeah, you're gonna need. You have a higher demand now, so.
Yeah, the gods are literally murdering each other, but okay. Yeah. So okay, I just have to say this real quick. I normally listen to my podcasts at over 3x speed. So it's still taking a little adjusting to your voices right now. My brain is going, why are they talking so slow?
Oh, man.
Ben had that problem with a recent book, so I'm sure he can relate.
I listened to... I can't get up to 3x. You have a lot more practice at this than I do. I could do 2, depending on the narrator. But yeah, I listened to that the last book we read. That one did get up to 2.5 times because I was just like, okay, she's got to be done insulting this person at some point. Okay.
Was this the British book with the murders? Yeah.
Like at some point she's got to murder somebody, right? It's in the
I have picked up a few books on your guys' recommendations. I'm not going to pick up that one.
Good call. Good
Oh,
my. No, what's that book? I'm Glad My Mom Is Dead.
yeah, Jeanette McCurdy's
Jeanette
autobiography.
McCurdy. That's not something I normally ever would have picked up, but you guys talked about it. I was like, you know what? I'll give this a shot. Sounds kind of cool. I enjoyed it. It was a disturbing book, but it was well written. And...
I mean, it's an important book. It's one of those ones like it's a really good, well written book. I would be disturbed if you said it was your favorite. But yeah, that's another weird one where like I had to keep justifying like, you know, I did not as an adult man watch iCarly. I have sisters 10 years younger than me.
I'm really only aware it exists because some people have memes based off of what they post on the internet. Right.
That's how I know I'm getting older. When the Gibby falling off the ladder meme started trending, I was like, oh, all these kids can use the internet now.
Mm-hmm.
And they use it at younger and younger ages.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to have to shut down my router once my daughter gets be like 3 years old, and that'll just be the end.
Probably for the best. The internet was a mistake. I'm just going to say it. Yes, it's made my career. Yes, I'm entirely dependent on my way of life, but mistake.
As a web developer, I can confirm sometimes I feel like I don't build the missiles, but you know. I know people who have like moral obligations against working on defense contracts, and it gets that way with like certain websites too. Like, I don't know if I could take this job. There are so many.
Yeah. Yeah. You ever read any Cory Doctorow?
I have not.
So he has.
I don't read.
That is fair. That is fair, Nate. You just have. I'm just envisioning like you getting your stories not from reading, but from Ben chewing up the pages of books and then feeding to you briefly.
Oh, so you've listened to the episodes where I try to convince him to read something.
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say.
That's the words about books.
I was going to say, I had to, as we were coming up with questions, I had to like stop Nate from asking questions only about have you read his erotica.
I have sadly not. It's not you, Nate. It's me. Geology-related stimulation.
Don't tell him that.
Some sort of geology-related erotica. Okay.
But I'm just saying, you need to get the science right. It's not going to work for me unless you get the science right.
All right.
Yeah. This is the challenge of the century.
Let me see.
It's not difficult.
I think I have an old geology book.
There are a lot of geology terms that are unnecessarily innuendo-filled. Do you know what the term for the pattern in which rocks habitually break is?
No.
Cleavage.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So there's a lot of old minerals that were named after early geologists.
Oh, geez.
One early geologist, English geologist, was named Lord Cummington.
There's a
mineral. There's a mineral named Cummingtonite. I'm not even joking.
I'm just trying to see if he's taking notes right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nate, I have to ask you. You have one question on this question list called "Spite as a Motivating Factor."
Yes. Nate, is that your question?
That's his question.
Yes.
Nate, you understand me. So yeah, Mage Errant 1, I wrote, and 2 really, and 3. Really, most of my writing is fueled heavily by spite. Right. Like that is my, but especially the first few books were written at spite towards my grocery store job. God, did I hate that job. Just every day I would get home at like 11 p.m. or whatever, 10, 11 p.m., make dinner and start writing. And write until I passed out. And it was just powered by spite towards my job. And also had a roommate and friend who just, he turned into a hater hard when I started writing. Seriously. Or writing my books. It was like,
really?
He was really supportive when I was working on my comics. But then I switched to novel writing. He kind of just flipped out, right? And a whole weird thing.
That's strange.
Yeah, he like trashed our friendship over it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Imagine if you just like tied your entire professional career to a guy who said he was going to write an erotica one day for $5. You had to proofread it and narrate it, and you don't support it, but you're just like, well, I'm in this deep. And...
Well, I mean, I dedicated one of the books to him out of spite. Right, this guy, just pulling, he was just telling me I wasn't going to succeed, telling me. When I started succeeding, just started telling me how terrible I am and how I'm doing a terrible thing, publishing this trash. And so I just, it's just, I think it was important that I put it out in the world that my success is thanks to him.
Oh man,
and I just wrote this out of spite.
It's really hard not to see that as jealousy.
Do you know what? He was a fucking brilliant musician. He was flat out good enough to be pro years before I was good enough writer to go pro. At the time that I started releasing my books, he was flat out a better musician than I was a writer. And a lot of people tell me, don't compare yourself like that. Don't compare yourself like that. That's, it's different mediums. It's like, no, sometimes you can compare. And this guy was legit musically fucking brilliant. And it is a tragedy that he just never put anything out in the world.
I've known so many people, usually in like the visual arts, who have all the talent in the world, but it is a grind to get out there. You got to take crap jobs. You got to do commissions you don't care about, and you just have to constantly sell yourself, and they don't have the energy for it. And some people are honest about that, and that's fine. If you really don't want to do it. But some people want to do it, but just can't make themselves, and that's where the rage grows and the hate grows.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if he was afraid of success or failure, but
Yeah.
That's why I haven't talked to the guy in years. But that was a hell of a thing to start my career with. That was rough.
That's a good attitude to go into it with, though. Is you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. Versus, you say you have imposter syndrome, but that's the good kind of imposter syndrome where it's like, I don't believe in myself, but if somebody else makes fun of me,
fuck them.
Yeah. I'm going to prove you wrong. Only I can be this mean to me.
Yeah. No, for a long time, I was absolutely a loser, right? Dead end jobs. I dropped out of college the first time, out of KU, and I think I learned a lot of important lessons in humility, mostly, right? And I think before I learned those lessons, if someone had talked shit on me, if someone had been a hater or whatever, I think I would have talked shit back, got all whatever. I think it would have crushed me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think really it was being a loser for so long and learning some necessary lessons about humility, deflating my ego a little bit, I think was really what let me power my spite. And it was just kind of like, what? No, I mean, really, I think it's just kind of like I was at this place where it's just like, no, I've seen how shitty I can get, how much of a loser I can be. I did not deserve this shit. Fuck you. I'm going to do this just to prove you wrong.
Yeah. I mean, you get to a certain point, you might as well try.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I'm going to write the book I wanted to write. And if one person likes it, I win.
What I always told myself, my metric for when I would consider myself a successful author, was not even just when I could make a living. It was when people had spent more time total reading my book than I had spent writing it. And I hit that point when I was like, clearly like, yeah, it's definitely, people have definitely spent more time reading than I've spent writing. That felt great, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And just, I'm glad it got to the point where I could make a living off of it.
Well, yeah, but that's an interesting metric for success, and I think that's a good one. I haven't thought about it that way.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where
this is the programmer in me. Do you ever track your time?
My reading or writing time?
Either. Do you track both?
No. I am very ADHD. I barely know what time it is. I seldom know what day it is. When I got the notification on my phone that I had this interview today, I was just like, I thought it was Thursday.
So how do you manage ADHD in writing?
Caffeine.
Stimulants, yes.
Stimulants. No, literally, yeah. Like my writing career only kicked off after my youngest brother introduced me to caffeine.
Wow. So do you have any like routines that help, or is it just...
Yeah, so I'm a very momentum and habit-based writer. If I stop writing for a few days, it's so hard for me to get back in it. I need to keep writing every day, not skip days. Maybe I can skip one day a week, but I prefer just like, even if we're doing like just doing 6 work days a week, still write like a couple hundred words on Sunday or whatever, just so I don't drop out completely. Because
Nate's nodding along, the mental health professional.
That's also how I've had to stick with writing. If I stop for any real length of time, it'll take months to get me back into it.
It used to take me that long too. I've gotten a bit better at getting back into it these days. A lot of just building up specific habits, figuring out what works for me, what doesn't, what times are best for me to write. I found that like sometimes like doing one of my short stories, working on a short story can kind of get me back into the game a little bit, and then I can switch back to one of my books.
Do you have a problem with overwork? Like, do you have a problem taking a break and coming back, or?
I did. My first few books, not so much the very first one, because it was a short book, right? But most of my early books, I had burnout pretty hard after I finished them, right? I pushed myself until I finished it, and then I just crashed mentally.
Yikes.
And breaks between books are getting longer and longer, and I've kind of built up more sustainable habits. One of the best things I did was lower my daily word count. I was setting myself a 3,000 word a day goal at first.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
I could do it, but it was wrecking me,
Yeah.
But then I lowered my daily word count goal to 1,500 words, right? Which is much more doable. And one thing I found is I regularly go over. Like, I'm regularly topping that 3,000 word original goal, but it takes so much less energy. Because once I hit that 1,500 word mark, I'm like, okay, I'm done for the day. If I want to keep going, this is just bonus, right? There's no stress on it anymore,
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And then also meeting my now wife helped a lot. Cause
I was going to ask if you had gotten married. I knew you were engaged.
Yeah. We haven't actually had a wedding yet, but we're married.
I did the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to the courthouse.
Yeah. We had to navigate both American and Vietnamese bureaucracy, which is a nightmare.
Fun.
I don't recommend either bureaucracy. Have you ever seen the movie Brazil?
No, but I've seen the scene that you're probably going to reference about bureaucracy.
I haven't actually seen Brazil, but every time I talk about bureaucracy and mention Brazil, people cringe. So I assume it's a pretty bad scene. I did a book review once where instead of reviewing the book, I reviewed Brazil, a movie I'd never actually seen. So the author was very pleased. The author enjoyed that, but another indie author. I have a very love-hate relationship with bureaucracy. I recognize how useful it is for, governing a civilization, for running things, making sure that the streets stay functional, and services provided and everything. And the hate part comes whenever I have to interact with it in any way, shape, or form.
So, are you living in Vietnam now? Right?
Yeah, actually, if you look on the wall behind me,
Yeah, I saw that.
our house that we're renting has got these big Vietnamese propaganda posters up on the wall. I can't remember. We have a book of propaganda poster art that talks about all these posters that they're celebrating. I can't remember if it's this one or the one in our bedroom, but one of the posters celebrates like the 1,000th American plane shot down over Vietnam or something.
Oh gosh.
I don't know what it is.
Awkward.
Okay, so when me and my wife we'd kind of first gotten together, and at one point I kind of opened up to her. It's like, when I first came to Vietnam, I was really nervous. I was thinking like people would resent me because I was American, but everyone's just been super nice to me. Like they find out from America, like, oh, what part? Oh, I've heard it's lovely there. Right? Just totally like normal, friendly conversations. Right? No one's holding American against me. And she's like, well, yeah, of course not. Of course we don't have a grudge against you. We kicked your ass.
I'm glad they're not sore winners. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, that is actually great.
Yeah.
So, do you have like the equivalent of a green card there, or because I know like if you were to come to America as a self-employed person, that is a huge challenge.
Yeah. Good luck, basically.
Yeah. So yes, sort of. I have a 1-year multiple entry family visa right now.
Okay.
And then any point during that year, I can turn it into a residency card. So basically a green card. The process is easier than it is in the States. It's still not easy.
Yeah, it sounds much easier. I know people who have been here on H-1B for 15 years and apply like every year for the green card, and they just don't win the lottery.
Okay, yeah, having a lottery system is cruel and awful, and just Anglosphere countries in general have fucking cruel, awful, horrid immigration policies.
Yeah. So what made you choose Vietnam when you decided to go overseas? Was it just a place you'd always wanted to visit, or do you have family or history?
I was traveling as a digital nomad before the pandemic. I'd spend, a few weeks here, a month here, 2 months there, right? Just traveling and writing and visiting wherever. And when the pandemic was kicked off and everyone's like, oh, this is serious. And I Nate's going to make a little bit of fun of me for this, but I wrote and released a book. I had just finished writing a book about a pandemic. And I was looking at the COVID stuff. I was like, nah, this isn't going to take off. Everything's going to be fine.
No, that's what I thought too. So
I made fun of him for that later.
Yeah.
Okay, Ben, I guess you need to make fun of me to that too, because it's not fair to Nate if you don't make fun of me for that as well.
I have crippling anxiety about everything, so I'm either happily surprised or right. So,
as a Jew, I feel that. In my defense, I was in Fiji, and I was very relaxed. I had never spent that much time in a hammock on the beach in my life before that, and I was just like, everything's fine. It's fun. But yeah, and so basically things are kicking off, and I have the choice. I had a ticket to Vietnam. I was going to meet some friends there. I could have stayed in Fiji, or I could have just stopped in New Zealand because my visa was still good for another. I don't remember how long, but I could have spent my pandemic in either three, right? And I was basically looking at it, and I was just like, I don't want to go back to the States for this. It's turning into a shit show there.
Yeah.
I ended up going to Vietnam. It turns out any of the three would have been good choices, right? All three countries did really good at holding on to form, I mean, New Zealand was ranked number...
Yeah.
Yeah, New Zealand was number one in the world at controlling COVID. Vietnam was number 2 up until Delta.
Oh my god!
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we just walk around. There was no COVID in the country, right?
Wow.
Well, I mean, did Vietnam have to deal with the SARS epidemic?
I don't believe so. No, the reason that Vietnam did so well is because of geopolitical tensions with China. China and Vietnam have like thousands of years of beef. For all their economic ties and stuff, they do not get along super well. They fought a war in '75. Vietnam kicked China's ass. China just pretends it didn't happen.
Vietnam 2 for 2.
I mean, basically, China's whole idea was, oh, Vietnam just got done with the war with the Americans. Oh, they're probably like really tired and fucked up.
They're not the most prepared they've ever
Big
been.
mistake.
And filled with combat-ready veterans.
Yeah.
China did lots of surprise attack, looked like one village, and then got booted out. I mean, just a general lesson: don't invade Vietnam. Like they're the only country to have repelled not one, not two, but 3 land invasions by the fucking Mongol Empire.
Oh my god!
I can see why they have a book of propaganda posters.
Yeah, no, the book is ours. We bought it at an art store. Just the paintings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's also like a bunch of movie posters that someone painted. Like these are like hand-painted copies of movie posters for like Dune and 2001: A Space Odyssey and The X-Files and a lot of 2001. I think we have like 4 2001 posters upstairs.
That's awesome.
Yeah. My brother's coming to visit here this spring, and his favorite movie is 2001. And the guest room's filled with 2001 paintings, 2001 posters, so I think he's gonna be happy. Right, so Vietnam's whole thing was right. They have all this beef with China. They were just spying on China. They hacked into China's servers and got the actual reports of what's going on with COVID when China's telling the world, oh, it's fine. And Vietnam's espionage stuff was like, oh no, it's fucking not. So Vietnam locks down hard, just kind of because they just don't trust China, and it worked, right? I mean, Vietnam's a lot poorer than a lot of first world countries, right? Mm-hmm. They're definitely not an impoverished nation like they used to be, right? They're doing.
They sound like they have better cyber defense than we do. So,
best defense is a good offense.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So they relied heavily on mass quarantines and tracking and social mobilization because they have a lot more support. The Vietnamese government has a lot more support from the people for stuff like this, for public health stuff, than the American government does, right?
Yeah,
which is to say, they have
most
some
countries,
sort of support.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a low bar to clear,
but but yeah, no, like the population actually on board. There were like name and shame programs, which probably wouldn't fly in the States, right? Like HIPAA probably prevents it, name and shame in the States, yeah. But no, like people violated it. Like there was some wealthy heiress / celebrity here who flew in from Germany and spread COVID around in the early days.
Ooh.
She basically lost her celebrity status. The whole country was just basically fuck you.
Wow.
Right. And when I landed, right, it turned out there's someone with COVID on my plane.
Oh no.
I thankfully didn't get it, but they quarantined me in a hotel for 2 weeks. Right. I couldn't leave my room at all. Took my temperature, 2 times a day. Had to take COVID tests. These were the early tests. They still weren't sure, so they were just jamming all the way back.
All the way up into your brain.
So is there a lot of...
Was that terrifying? Were you
say...
oh my god, I'm gonna die, I have a disease,
it was
possibly?
Oh yeah, no, I was legit freaked out. Like it was stressful. I was like, okay, I'm locked in a hotel, I can get a lot of writing done. I got 0 writing done. I just stressed.
Yeah.
And played video. Okay, I stressed out and played Darkest Dungeon, which is probably not the best game to be playing at that time.
Well, yeah, 2 things to that is like, 1, that's the classic pandemic mistake is this the most stressful time in my life is when I'm going to get all these projects done. And 2, I'm wondering, do you speak Vietnamese? Do they have a lot of English proficiency?
A lot of English proficiency. It's regularly taught in high schools.
Okay.
Right? It's just part of the normal curriculum.
So
Ben
at least
doesn't
you
believe me
have some
when
idea
I
they
tell
can
him
explain...
he could just go to Japan.
Yeah, I would. Part of me really wants to learn Vietnamese, but it's a very difficult language for English speakers. it is because it's a tonal language.
Yeah.
With 9 tones. Mandarin only has 4 tones, so Cantonese has 12. So it's a difficult language to learn. Once you do learn the tones, it's very easy to get better at it, right? Very easy to master because it's a very logical, orderly language in a lot of ways. Much more so than English, which is actually 3 or 4 languages in a trench coat that mug other languages their grammar, right?
Yeah.
And the alphabet, it uses the Roman alphabet because of the French. But no, there's a lot of people here that speak English. My wife is completely bilingual, like native level fluency in English. Google Translate exists and it's super helpful. It's pretty easy to get by.
So I'm just trying to imagine, like, if I was stuck in a country I'd never been in before. I don't know if you'd visited Vietnam before. And
once briefly.
I'm under COVID quarantine and people are showed up to my room to take my temperature. Can they explain what's going on? Do I know how long I'm going to be here? Like,
yeah. The food was good at least.
Well, that's a plus. Looking on the bright side there.
Yeah.
So with your tourist visa, were you able to just rent an apartment and all that?
Yeah. No, I just rented an apartment in a high rise by the beach. And then Vietnam kept extending my visa. Like every month, they just automatically extend the tourist visas for people who arrived in that March. So I got basically 2 years off of a 3-month visa.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, one 3-month extensions. The first 6 months were just myself, and then they just kept giving me extensions after that. And then I got. Eventually, they were like, "Okay, we're done with this. You're getting kicked out." And my now wife, then girlfriend at the time, we decided, okay, we knew it was coming eventually. And we decided, when you do leave, it's we're not going to try long distance. We'll stay friends, and then it happened earlier than we expected. We're like, say it's, and a few months after I returned, we stayed in touch. She calls me up, and long story short, it's basically like, fuck it, let's get married. Just proposed to me. It was a bit more romantic than that, but
even that's kind of romantic. I mean,
right?
You're like, we're definitely done. We it's the responsible thing to do. And it's like, no.
Yeah. It's good to be back here. Like, the food's great, the weather's great. We're right by the beach.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like typhoon season's not too bad.
It's not too bad. So it's actually worse farther away from the beach than it is by the beach.
Oh.
Because the beach is actually kind of high ground, right? The land like slopes up, hits the beach, and then drops down, right? Where the flooding is down by the river, basically.
Okay.
So closer to like the old town. No, it's the one thing is I sometimes the typhoon, the pressure drops give me headaches. Or migraines even, and that sucks.
Yeah.
But other than that, no, typhoon season's not too bad.
So are you settling in Vietnam for a little while, or the digital nomad days over?
Yeah. I think a huge number, maybe even most digital nomads only make it a few years and then stop. Right. I'm glad I have that behind me. I like to be able to look back and be like, yeah, I was a digital nomad. But I'm glad it's over. Right. It was rough.
Yeah,
just not having a community around you and
like one suitcase and
what? Yeah, just a 40-liter backpack.
Wow,
that's not very big.
Yeah.
And just not really having community and not it was rough. And like the first like however long of the pandemic, I think it's like I was in Vietnam like 8 or 9 months before I met my now wife. And I didn't know anybody, didn't go anywhere. I just ordered food in and worked and then hung out on the beach.
Well, not bad. Where'd you guys meet?
It's not
then?
bad. Tinder.
Tinder. Okay. Hey, it's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, it's good to be back because we got the cats now. I'm gonna be honest. Food here in Vietnam is just flat out better than food in the States.
Again, low bars. I mean,
yeah,
we've got barbecue, and that's about it.
and like New Orleans food,
Yeah.
Creole. But uh yeah, no, I was once talking to my wife about American cuisine, and she just looks at me and is like, America doesn't have cuisine. I was like, dagger to the heart.
Oh,
You're not wrong, but no, there's some fun regional stuff in America, but just as a nation, there's no.
We will add butter to whatever it is that you have. We'll just keep adding butter.
Okay, you know what? The French do that too, and they still. That's all French food is. It's cuisine and wine. Or it's butter and wine. Right, that's it. The reason why French food smells so good, it's just butter with wine in it. Everything they cook.
The tomato's a North American plant, right?
Yeah.
So we can just claim Italian food. That's my strategy for getting out of this.
I mean, Okay, so random meme time. Are you guys familiar with Italian Elon Musk?
No.
Oh no.
Right, it's me, Elon Musk. I send the calzone into space. And it's just, this is a meme before he bought Twitter, right? And people would just respond to him with just ridiculous Italian Elon Musk quotes, and it pissed him off so much. And a bunch of parody Italian Elon Musk accounts got deleted when he.
I'm looking this up now. Italian Elon Musk. Oh, yeah, that's the first one. I sent him a calzone into space. I don't pay the taxes. Oh.
I like the picture too.
Yeah.
So many. I make the marionettes paint like a Rick and Morty. I am a pickle Rick Pison.
Oh God.
Yeah, sorry. Just had to. Sometimes I will just. I hate Elon Musk. He's one of my least favorite billionaires. And sometimes I'll just be like laughing. I'll just start like laughing hysterically. And my wife will just like be walking by or sitting on the couch next to me and just look over at me, and she's like, "Did something bad happen to Elon again?" The other day, she's like, "What happened?" Like, he's being sued for non-payment of rent by the King of England.
That is better than fiction. Yeah.
Oh my God. I love seeing bad things happen to bad people.
It's just it's fun to watch the myth that because somebody has a lot of money, they're obviously very capable. Just be destroyed in real time.
Yeah. So, I listened to some like mathematicians, some statisticians talking about the meritocracy myth, and they were like, okay, so I don't think anyone's going to say that luck holds no effect, right? I don't think anyone but the most like hardcore Ayn Rand worshipper will deny that luck's important, right?
Yeah.
Even people who are still buying a meritocracy myth will admit, okay, yeah, there's some luck involved, yeah. And the statisticians are talking, and it's just like, and they're like, okay, you're talking about a sample size in the hundreds of millions of people, talking about people who get to this wealthy and powerful, even a tiny impact by luck statistically will be a huge factor, right? Because, and what the math says, if you seriously plot out and look at it, is the most likely people to become super successful are going to be mediocre average people, because there's just so many more of them, right? You add that into luck, which is completely an independent variable to how smart you are. Luck's going to win out.
I had a friend who was from rural Mississippi, had like the worst education, I think, like the highest teen pregnancy rate in his town. It was almost over 80%. And he got out of it. He got his computer science degree, and we wound up working at the same job. And I knew a little bit more theory than he did. And we would always sit around and talk. And he went down this like meritocracy, like not like right, like more libertarian leaning route. And he kept telling me, he'd be like, well, you worked hard for what you have. And I was like, nah. No, if I had grown up where you were, if nobody told me I was going to college, I wouldn't have gone. That was and he couldn't believe that, because he's like, but you know so much about so many things. And it's like, yeah, that's because somebody told me that's the plan for you. You're going to college. If I hadn't, my parents would have been mad, so I did it because it was easier than not doing it. Which is, most people consider it a privilege, and I'm just like, oh yeah, it's another box I got to check so I don't get yelled at.
Yeah. No, there's this great quote. Are you familiar with Stephen Jay Gould?
Yes.
Brilliant man, passed tragically too soon. He was, I mean, he honestly, I think he was one of the last like great polymaths we've had. The man was a geologist, ecologist, evolutionary biologist, paleontologist, sabermetrician, intellectual historian. Brilliant man. But there's this quote that I keep coming back to again and again that heavily influences a lot of what I write, that really affects my thinking on all the stuff. And it's, here we go. I am, somehow, less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. You know, and it's just so much of when we talk about meritocracy, when we try to explain why brilliant people are so brilliant, why successful people are so successful, it ends up serving the status quo, right? Mm-hmm. It exists to justify the high position that people hold, right? This is why thinkers like Steven Pinker, or as I prefer to call him, Pevin Stinker, you know, or what's his name, the lobster guy?
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson, yep.
Why is he the lobster guy?
Oh, he has a thing about lobsters have hierarchies. So,
God, no, I have seen that.
Yeah,
it is so stupid, and biologists are all like, "You're an idiot."
He's one of yours, Nate. He's a psychologist.
No, not one of mine. Psychology, that's a different field. I'm psychiatry. Okay, totally different thing.
Yeah, it's easier for you to steal drugs.
Yeah,
exactly.
But these guys, setting aside all the politics, setting aside the fact they're annoying, belligerent jerks, they exist. They are so successful because they fundamentally flatter the status quo, mm-hmm. right? You know, most explicitly and obviously with Pevin Stinker.
He's the everything's okay actually guy.
He's wrote the better angels of our nature. Where he wrote this whole book about life is better than it's ever been.
Yeah,
his arguments aren't all wrong, right? Many things are great. It is a great time to live, like health, like medicine wise, not necessarily health wise, but medicine wise, in a lot of ways. But his arguments all basically center around, so we shouldn't be trying to improve things because things are already great. Yeah. Right. And this is it's kind of a big theme in my writing.
I was going to ask about that as you were talking about it, because it seems something you're obviously passionate about. And I'm wondering, you mentioned the new book is about giant megastructures. Does somebody own them?
That's a good question. That's an important question.
I assume they're communes where everybody is equally responsible.
There's definitely not an underprivileged underclass living lower down with less access to sunlight and movement and
Well, I'm glad to hear there isn't one of those. That would be a real downer. So, yeah.
As you sit there in your crown and your sunglasses.
Nate, I hate to break it to you. I have been known to partake in sarcasm every once in a blue moon. So the actual structure of the megastructure, it is a linear megastructure. So rather than getting tall, it gets long.
And I got there's one of those in Dubai, or there's going to be.
Yes. Yeah, I was already planning this series when they announced that, and I was like,
"Oh my god,
I'm writing a book about why this is a bad idea."
It's happening again.
Can you see the future?
Right. So this whole long linear megastructure thing, but then I got to thinking, like, okay, it doesn't make sense for it just to be one long line. They're probably doing multiple lines that branch and intersect and come together with like almost cell-shaped bits of land contained within these long, lean structures, right? And so basically you have this megastructure city that's spreading out over the land, right? The wealthy live on top of it. There's infrastructure down below. So, some people live and work further down. And then the poor people all live on the ground inside the walls, right? And their freedom of movement is curtailed by these walls. They have to pass through them to get between one cell and another. And there's definitely no obvious allegories that rise up from that. Definitely not.
No lower class.
Yeah. Actually,
business class. It's business
One
class.
second. I've got a cool book to show you guys.
He's describing the Amtrak.
Does the thing only record for 2 hours?
That's what I was going to say. We'll probably have to wrap up soon.
Okay.
So, this is one of those books from the 60s and 70s about megastructures.
Oh, wow.
This thing's out of print. Like, it's like $100 to track down. It's filled with all, like, crazy, trippy-ass, You guys have seen, like, weird 60s hand-drawn illustration or diagrams books, right?
Yeah.
And, like, diagrams of megastructures and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. That's pretty fun. And then you have this other book of his, which is, it's a square. It's just a square, right? And this one is literally about linear cities that I'm talking about. And the crazy thing to me is these guys were very much utopians, right? Thought they were making a better world through designing a better world through architecture, that these arcologies used to be a utopian thing, fundamentally utopian thing. And that's crazy to me because it seems like a deeply dystopian endeavor to me, right?
It sounds like the Sprawl from Neuromancer.
Yeah, well, I mean,
which was a utopian book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally the subheading of this book. It's "The City in the Image of Man" by Paolo Soleri.
Sounds like something a villain would say.
This man in another life absolutely would have been a supervillain.
Yeah,
no question. But the subtext of the book is this book is about miniaturization. Like that's the subtitle for the book. This book is about miniaturization because one of the core fundamental ideas of the arcology, and in my opinion, one of the more intelligent ideas is lowering the total size of the city's footprint on the world. Right, having it sprawl less, having smaller distances to transport goods and people. Right, they're very concerned with walkability within the megastructure. I think that really they just took it too far. Right.
Was there any sense that they knew that this was not realistic, but that they were just trying to do as much as possible?
I think a lot of them were just like, okay, this is the trendy thing. If you want to be taken seriously as an architect, you got to come up with a design. Others were, more techno-utopian madmen like Paolo Soleri. Others then like the Archigram, which is this collective of young British architects in the 50s and 60s. I think they started in the late 50s, early 60s, and like for 10 years they produced this magazine called Archigram, where they were proposing like modular cities and walking cities and all this crazy stuff. But it was less. I don't think they were all. I think a lot of it they knew could never happen. but it very much was this like exaggerated backlash against the status quo. That's very much of like, hey, here's other things we can do. Here's new ways we can take and understand it.
I know in Japan they just tore down. They built a capsule building, and they just took it down.
That was made. I know the exact building you're talking about, and that was, I believe, made by Metabolism, which was the Japanese equivalent to Archigram. They were a architecture collective big into megastructure stuff, and I actually have a book on them too. I won't go grab it, but it's I still need to read it. But yeah, so I was deep diving. I just find it fascinating. I don't think that megastructures and arcologies are inherently dystopian. I don't think they have to end up badly. I think it would just be profoundly easy to. I think the big mistake of a lot of these guys was, this is a technology, this is a tool, and they assumed that it would have a telos, an inherently good telos that would improve things. It's like, no, it's going to do what we use it for.
Yep.
Right. You can use a good tool for good or bad, and arcology is another tool. But it really is a great way to talk about a lot of the themes I want. I'm very interested in talking about indirect economic colonialism. Arcologies are a great way to talk about that, right? I want to talk about like enclosure and all these other issues, and it works great, And I'm also just going to have a couple dumbasses wandering around doing violence.
So I think our recording is probably going to cap out at 2 hours. So we should probably look at wrapping up. Is there anything you want to say about this book or any of the books? Do you know is this book coming out anytime soon? Or
so I'm finishing up Mage Errant 7 right now. I literally have it open on my other monitor, finishing it up. I've got like probably a few weeks more work on that for sent to my editor.
Oh wow!
And then, it's I started writing Mage Errant in 2018. It feels kind of crazy to be getting this close to finishing it.
The end of the era.
Yeah. Then I'm going to be starting that series next. We're planning rapid release for that trilogy. We're going to try to do one book every 6 months for that. Hopefully the first one, planning to get it to my editor and then to my audiobook publisher this summer. So hopefully the series should start coming out this year. Awesome. And then, along with Mage Errant 7 and the Mage Errant short story collection as well, because that's done. The short stories are already written for my Patreon.
Awesome. Are they doing an audiobook for that as well?
Yeah, they are. Which I'm excited about. I love writing short stories. I had a lot of fun doing it. It's not going to sell as well as the main series book. There's just not much of a market for short stories. But I think I hope people are going to like them. I think they'll do all right.
I've been trying to push short stories on the podcast a little bit. I don't know. I've been reading. This is a whole other tangent, but I've got a whole thing coming out eventually on like the light novel phenomenon in Asia, and I feel like there's a huge market for it. There's sections in Barnes and Nobles in the States now that are just light novels, all imports, and there's no reason we can't be doing domestic short stories and novellas and light novels.
Oh yeah. And it's, you probably saw that in the Wrack, like my obsession with the short story form,
the connected vignette. Yeah, it was, and it made the world the main character.
Yeah. And to an extent,
I really like that.
Well, thank you. I'm going to do that to an extent with More Gods and Stars, where many of the chapters are just going to be work as short stories. Like, are you familiar with Alan Dean Foster at all?
Yes. Yeah.
He was a huge influence on me growing up. He's going to be a huge influence on the series, but he loves doing this thing where the entire chapter is from the perspective of just like some local in a village or some villain or whatever who encounter the main characters. Right? They don't know the main characters. They don't know what's going on, who these people are. They have their own stuff going on. And it's just, you interact with the main characters sometimes from this perspective. And he did all these chapters like that. And I'm so excited to do a bunch of chapters like that.
Well, and I that worked for the Wrack. I think that worked out great for the Wrack, and I'm excited to see what this does, because that sounds like thematically perfect for this encapsulated, separated society that's also connected in this larger structure. It just sounds like the story. It's meta art. It's what, not to invoke House of Leaves, but the book is the structure.
Yeah. So I guess as D&D players and gamers, what are your feelings on mimics?
I just open every chest I see, and if it's a mimic, I fight it.
I typically have lower magic worlds, so I don't think I've ever even run a mimic.
More Gods and Stars has a mimic-based ecosystem.
That's fascinating. Maybe this will influence our D&D.
I did run with the crystal eyes thing, so that's
Can
already
the mimics
in my
be ground
D&D.
into a fine powder and snorted for
Ben, anything can be ground into a fine powder and snorted. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll do anything, but you can grind it into fine powder and snort it.
Nice.
It might need to be at a very dangerous temperature to do it.
I get what you're saying. I need a spoon.
There you go.
Yeah. So I think if there's nothing else you guys want to talk about, we could probably wrap.
Yeah. Any plugs that John wants to get out there?
Yeah, check out Mage Errant or the Wrack on Amazon or Audible. I don't think we explicitly mentioned it in this interview yet, but they are part of the same multiverse, and so are More Gods and Stars. You don't need to read one of them to read the others, but if you read them all, there'll be lots of connections and stuff tying them together. And if you've read my books and want more of my stuff, you can check me out at Patreon at patreon.com/John Bierce. Other than that, yeah, I think I just want to leave it off with, if you try hard enough, you can grind anything to a powder and snort it.
I love that. That is the lesson for the day. So with that,
get any bit of wisdom from me. It's that.
Yep. So with that, I guess we'll leave off. I can add our plugs in post. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, the first real author that we have ever had. By which I mean not fake. So no, I appreciate it so much. I'm so happy you could come on. This was great.
I'm happy to be on. This is a lot of fun.
Maybe we'll do it again. I'm looking forward to the new books. We're going to finish the Mage Errant series at some point, and then we will have to catch up.
I am really excited to hear what you think about them. Don't spare my feelings. Don't spare
it. That's not the words about books way. But yeah, no, thank you so much.
Thank you.